Hi everyone, my name is George Sakatos and I will be discussing the differences in pathogens, more specifically the differences in genetic variation of pathogens and why that's important. So just some literature review. Here are the different articles and studies that I used in my research. The first article was used to provide an alternative and a more efficient way of determining the heritability of certain traits within individuals. The second article was used as an example of a pathogen with high genetic diversity that was able to rapidly produce antifungal drug resistance. The third was used as an example of how pathogens can negatively affect crop yields and why learning about the genetic variation within the pathogen population is important. The fourth article includes an example of a pathogen negatively impacting species biodiversity in amphibians. And the last article was used as an example to show the extent to which pathogens in crops can reduce crop yields. I'll go into further detail of all of these as the presentation goes on. So my argument thesis that I aim to support with my research is that a population with a higher genetic diversity will have a higher chance of success due to better defenses against pathogens, and that recognizing and identifying the patterns in the genetic diversity of pathogens will allow scientists to better understand how to prevent the spread of other pathogens. So, in terms of importance, determining the reason for the differences in the genetic composition of different pathogens is extremely important for a few reasons. First, pathogens result in a significant loss of biodiversity in many ecosystems. For example, the pathogen Bactropicurium Dendrobatidis is a fungal infection that, while it does not affect humans, heavily impacts the skin of amphibians, resulting in the decline of many amphibian species to near extinction levels. As a result, this fungal infection has been identified as the pathogen that is the leading cause of the reduction of biodiversity on the planet. Also, pathogens have become more dangerous in recent years as humans have become increasingly connected to each other over long distances. As people have begun to travel across the globe more frequently, they are more likely to carry a pathogen from one part of the world to another. Pathogens are also largely responsible for the reduction in crop yields on many farms as well. For example, in a March 2021 study article, a group of researchers in Pernambuco state in Brazil observed the genetic diversity of anthracnose pathogen, which under favorable conditions can result in a total yield loss of common beans, meaning that no beans were able to be effectively harvested. This specific pathogen can also have negative effects on the economy of Brazil as well, as the country is one of the world's largest producers of the common bean. So while it's true that that last point does not really relate to genetic diversity, it might be an incentive for other people to care more about the genetic diversity of pathogens if they knew that the economy would be negatively affected as well. So in class, we learned about a few ways that having more genetic variation is beneficial to a population's success. One reason is that when a population has higher genetic diversity, the population will be better able to survive a change in habitat, as it will be more likely that a few individuals within that population will have the necessary adaptations required to survive. As an example, if there is a population of rodents that live in a forest, a population with more genetic diversity will be better able to survive in the same area if the forest is destroyed, whether the forest was burned down or if deforestation occurred in the area. Populations with greater genetic diversity are also more likely to succeed in environments where competition is present. So for example, a new invasive species might threaten a native population by introducing competition for resources. So a population with a greater genetic diversity will be more likely to have a few individuals that are better able to survive with alternative resources, which would help to reduce the competition among populations. So these same concepts also can apply to pathogens. So populations of pathogens that have a greater genetic diversity will be better able to resist antibiotics, which means that they will be more likely to survive. For example, another 2021 study observed the genetic diversity of different fungal infections, such as S. cerevisiae and Candida glabrata, and found that the latter of the two had higher genetic diversity and was able to rapidly evolve antifungal drug resistance. So one important factor to consider in regards to determining patterns in genetic diversity is to determine how much of the observed variety in a trait is related to genetic differences between individuals. The most commonly used model to determine this is the random effect model, which assumes that all of the variables that would affect genetic diversity are independent of each other. This method is usually done because it is more simple for computational reasons. However, a 2021 research article proposes a new method known as boosting heritability, which involves the creation of a high-dimensional, more linear model to produce an estimate of heritability. Boosting heritability has been shown to produce reliable data regarding estimating heritability in between individuals. So the researchers recommended that the method should be more widely accepted. Another thing of note is that pathogens with higher genetic diversity will also have mitigated impacts of competition within their populations, as they will be more likely to be able to attach to unique cells that are not shared by other pathogens. So some other things to note regarding patterns is that discovering the patterns by which a population of a pathogen has a high genetic variation is extremely important for a few more reasons. First, the patterns will allow scientists to better predict how a particular pathogen might evolve in the future. If scientists are able to predict this, they will be better able to create more effective antibiotics to combat the pathogens more quickly, which will allow for several lives to be saved due to the sooner distribution of the vaccine to the public. Also, having a better understanding of the evolution patterns of pathogens will also be useful in that scientists will be better able to predict the effects that certain pathogens will have on other organisms, such as plants and animals. So for example, a 2021 analysis of the tomato black ring virus found that the viral population is being shaped by genetic recombination. So now that the source of the genetic variation in that pathogen is known, scientists will be better able to counter that variation with more effective antibiotics, which means that the yields for tomatoes crops will increase, resulting in more food for people to eat. So this is just a slide of who did what. This was an individual project, so I did everything. And here are my references. Thank you for listening to the presentation.